Realms, I think of Jaroon is what it's called, which is an extremely obscure role playing game that they made into like an action adventure title.
I think they
So
did a
that was
lot of.
kind of wild to find.
I think they did a lot of stuff like that back in the day. I was just watching a Cuso Grande, which is like a bad game tournament, and there was like a computer adventure game based off of an in living color character. So they just kind of did whatever back then.
Yeah. Heady days.
Yeah. I still, one of these days, I want to fire up that weird Magic the Gathering computer game they made back in the day because it like has no rules.
What?
I,
How is
I thought I saw someone describe. He's like, if you just want to make a deck that's all mountains and lightning bolts, that's a viable deck. There's no like 4 card limits or
it's the unlimited power? It's terrifying.
yeah, it's just computer games.
Yeah. How does it work?
I,
I
I
know the kids will look at you put a spaceship on something, those kids will buy it.
yeah, I like related to this. I was thinking about like I really kind of wonder. I want to like go spelunking through just like old like media because I wonder like how hard it is or how interesting it would be to find like the next. Because I was listening to and I was gonna play some of it this show, but I didn't buy it because I didn't feel like it at the time. Do you know like the Langley School Project, that album?
I don't. I can Google it.
Yeah, it's I think it was in Canada during the '70s. I think it was elementary school, maybe middle school age kids, like, and they just performed songs they liked, and that was like their band project. And somebody had
That's
found it at one point, and then it got like reprinted, and now it's on Bandcamp and everything.
that's fascinating.
And there are
This is
like these really
sorry.
interesting takes on like space oddity and like
Huh.
God
I
only
have a
knows. And they
I have a friend. Go ahead. Sorry.
on like Rhiannon
I
performed
have a
by like
friend who's like really into the weird shit, and I
yeah,
gotta send this to him.
it's exceptional. I was one of these nights. I need to find. See, the thing is, I need to find a third because it's going to be that, which is like I think legitimately there's good stuff in there, and then there's like the Shags, which is its own very special thing. If you're familiar with the Shags,
I'm not.
if you're not, I would look up the Shags after this. I, some guy's fortune-telling mother said his children were going to be musicians, so he gave them all his 3 daughters guitars and drums and made them play music with no training at all.
That's fucking wild.
It's absolutely wild shit. But then it's
I love
like
this like weird unknown armies kind of shit.
and you have like people like Kurt Cobain saying, "Oh, this is my favorite album of all time," or not literally that, but like musicians all like get weirdly into this because it's this outsider, bizarre music, and I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that fucking rules.
But I wish I. What I, the point to go back is like I want to go to like a thrift store and like whatever come like happen across like these weird undiscovered gems, and I wonder how easy or like even possible that is,
Oh, with software, you mean,
or like anything
or
really.
or anything? Yeah, like it's one of those. God, I miss. Okay, so now I miss going to thrift stores.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there is kind of a magic to like going through and like finding something that's very cool and unusual. You can sort of invent these stories in your head about them. Actually, speaking of unknown armies, there's not any of my one shots, but a friend of mine has like a con game he runs where you go through somebody's music collection that has all these first printings of Frank Zappa albums,
Yeah.
and like I think they're like used as part of like a ritual. That's the kind of thing that's fairly normative in an Unknown Armies game.
Okay. So
Um,
let's go back for a second for people who don't know what is Unknown Armies.
yeah, I guess I should probably explain that.
Yeah. Well, we're
So
just talking
Unknown.
about shit that nobody knows about.
Hey, I was having a heck of a time
Yeah. No, I have too.
talking
I love.
about the Shags. That was amazing.
I love
Um,
we talked about this previously in the pre-show about just straight hook it straight to the vein hipsterism.
yes, that's the kind of person that I am. So Unknown Armies is a role-playing game. It's an urban fantasy role-playing game where you play a bunch of grimy weirdos who are trying to use occult magic to fix the world, whatever that means to them. Um, and in Unknown Armies, you basically play like one of three types of people. Either you play like a normal person, which is a superpower in No Known Armies because everyone who's into this weird occult shit, like thinking that a Frank Zappa first printing album could be magic,
Yeah.
is so crazy that being normal is a superpower.
Right.
Or you're what's known as an avatar, which is like you embody these Jungian archetypes that are sort of embedded in the collective unconscious, and your ability to do that well gives you magic powers.
All right.
So if you embody like the archetype of the mother
Yes.
or like the messenger, you can cast magic that does crazy shit. Like there's one that's the firebrand where you can influence people or bring yourself back from the dead. Well, technically what
Yeah.
you do is you erase your death from reality so that you never actually die. But, you know,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
functionally
Right. Functionally coming back from the dead, but
eventually coming back from the dead.
but in the
and then
lore,
in the lore.
in
yeah,
the
that's-
feelings, in the yes.
Yeah. And then the third type of weirdo you can be is what's called an adept, which is you are so obsessed with something that you sort of like rip a little hole in reality and make it do what you want it to do. So like one of my favorite schools is Viaturgy, which is you're so obsessed with cars that you can just sort of leap through time or make your car do what you say or like heal a car by putting your hand on it. I'm trying to think of another good school that
Honestly, it sounds like a very good entry point for someone who is for nerds who are obsessed with one specific thing.
Yeah. There's rules for building your own adept schools, and people really like to do that. For some reason, I can't
Right.
imagine why.
I can't imagine why a nerd would like to subject people to multiple 3-hour sessions of them explaining their very specific interests.
Yes. What if it gave me magic powers though, and I really had it all figured
Right.
out?
Right. What if
yeah.
in detailing you describing you every single Zappa track out of the title, it gave me what if that was part of the game? Actually, Zappa adjacent, I had just listened to Trout Mask Replica again the other day.
Yes, that's the album. That's the album that the game is about.
Okay, technically Captain
Um,
Beefheart, but they're like friends.
I've tried to get into Frank Zappa, and I simply cannot. But I respect him.
There is before I made a last minute switch, and I guess for people who are going to be, fairly warned for next week, I was going to play a Banana Melt song, which is it's the previous 24 songs on the album, but all played at the exact same time.
Yes, that's the sort of thing I would expect Frank Zappa to do.
Yeah, Banana Melt is like this 2-piece out of Japan that I think is just like a guitar and a drum and yelling. And it's good. All their songs are like about a minute to half a minute long, and they're
As
good
someone
stuff.
who listens to hardcore and says this makes too much sense to me.
Yeah. I swing back and forth. I like a lot of things. I go from real chill ambient fiddle. I mean, this intro was like very Nora Lawway, which was, I don't know who she is. I got her album at some point on my computer. But it's like
Yeah.
this 8-minute semi-ambient fiddle-driven song. And then I end the intro with Fucked Up, which I'm like, oh yeah, Fucked Up is awesome.
I don't know that one, but
They're
I
Canadian
trust-
hardcore band.
Oh yeah, okay. I've only listened to like a couple bits of hardcore. It's a music genre that I really want to like, and periodically will like go and listen to some hardcore and be like, this is the time I'm really gonna get hardcore. And then like 3 songs later, I'm like, well, let's try back in 6 more months.
They're still singing out of their throat like that.
Yeah. I'm like, look, I just have to listen long enough. I'll find the melody line. It's got to be in here somewhere.
Rather than Fucked Up has a very clearly defined melody line.
That might be one to link to me then.
Yeah.
There's been a couple hardcore songs that I have liked.
And it has like a female vocalist as well that does like shared duty, and she does not do the throat screaming as much. The one I played before. I mean, whatever. David Comes to Life is a concept album, so they're also like weird in terms of whatever hardcore is.
I mean, like we had a conversation earlier about like what is folk punk exactly, and
Right.
no one really knows. You just throw a bunch of words together, and they're like, is this how you market? I hope so.
Right, right. Once you're once you're deep inside, like not listening to whatever music is, it's
Yes.
like nothing makes sense anymore. Nothing like I. How do you describe things to people without an easy frame of reference?
Yes. I mean, it absolutely is a problem. And like I've been trying to like get more into like soul and funk music and being largely successful, I think, but like it's been really hard to navigate because I don't have the musical language of that genre. Like it's totally new to me, and so I'm just sort of like wandering around. And like one thing I find with like most music when you're trying to get into it just broadly, like I had this problem with hardcore too, and a couple other times, is that like there are the people who are the very most famous in a genre,
Yeah.
and those people are very easy to find, like just a Google or two away from, the genre label. But like getting from that to like people who are kind of like more on like the up and coming edge of the scene is really difficult
Right.
because like it's look, let me explain capitalism.
Right. It's like you just go to Bandcamp and hope they publish like 20 up and coming hardcore
Yes.
acts, and you hope that they publish that article.
Yes, and like that's exactly what I've been doing with a lot of soul music is like, okay, well I found, Aretha Franklin and Irma Thomas, like the most famous people, and like, okay, now I'm gonna go to Bandcamp and see like what they think is the cool thing, because like that's the only it's the only jumping off point you have if like you're not familiar with it, is you sort of have to go to like these water cooler type places and hope that their recommendations are good, or else you're just gonna be stuck in like the most popular
Right.
examples of the music forever.
Or hope somebody who is into it.
Yes, that's the other thing. And actually, I did pursue that path as well, but many of my extremely intelligent, talented, and sophisticated friends listen to like neo soul, like the kind of the more modern version. It's like an excellent type of music, but like it's not as much my sort of thing. Like I find I kind of want something a little closer to like old soul music.
So you're saying you don't want shoegaze soul. I mean, I joke, but there's a band called The Veld, which is exceptional, and they can be described as shoegaze soul.
Oh gosh, I can kind of imagine. Yes, I know. So there's a funk band that I found on my travels that's based on like Thai funk.
Okay.
And that's basically what it is, except funk instead of soul. Let me pull up. The name is perhaps impossible for me to pronounce, but
We'll take it anyway.
yes. Okay, so the band name is Krang Bin.
Okay. Yes.
It's they're good. It's sort of background music to me. Like it's not something I can just sort of sit down and groove to. I'm posting it in our Discord channel so that you can see what it's actually written like. If you
Perfect,
want to
'cause
check that out.
I find music just basically by just here's a link and I just add it. Also, I mean, we spoke earlier slightly to dip more into the pre-show. That's the other benefit I think to Spotify is I think it's very easy to add songs, like that.
Yeah. I have like a weird, completely illogical system where I go on YouTube to sort of sample it, and then if I can find it on Bandcamp, that's great, and if not, like, and then I have to sort of find somewhere else to buy the music, which is annoying.
Oh yeah, I'm also like I've always been like the weird guy who will be like, oh, I read manga scans all the time, but then I buy full volumes. Like I listen to stuff on Spotify and then I buy it on Bandcamp.
Yeah, actually, I typically just read manga from print because, like, typically I consider like watching the anime if it's available. There's another preview, or else I'll take it out from the library.
Yeah.
But my SO does that, where he'll read the scanlation, and then if he likes it, he'll pick up the volume. I have trouble reading comics for extended periods on screens.
Yeah.
Unless like I'm full like rotating my laptop into tablet mode and I'm like sitting down and doing it. So I tend to just prefer to read them as library books, or if I really like it, I'll buy it.
It is not ideal, but it's an easier way to like. especially for like unlicensed stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And then that's basically all you have.
Until I've fully mastered the language and I can just like dive into
Yeah.
Pixiv or whatever. And
Good fucking luck. I
Hey,
studied Japanese for 5 years, man.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Yeah, I believe in you. Have you learned all your kana yet?
Yes.
Okay, good job. That's one of the big.
Wait, no, I learned on the Kana. I'm fairly good at.
Well, it's been a while, but I believe kana is both hiragana and katakana.
Okay,
They're both.
Hiragana I'm like 100% on. Katakana
Yeah.
I'm mostly there on. It's just because the kanji learning thing that I use.
Yeah, the kanji is really it's rough, man.
Yeah, the kanji learning thing I use only uses hiragana, doesn't use katakana, so I don't have it as in practice as much.
That's pretty normal. Like, I think I still have most of my hiragana, but my katakana is pretty much gone because it's really only used for writing words in other languages.
Right.
So like you don't get that like constant usage of it like you do when you're learning kanji and use the furigana. But
Yeah.
like Kids manga is a great way to learn kanji because it does include furigana, so you can just sort of read it and like you see the kanji, but you also have the reading. So
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier.
I've seen a couple of things like that where I've gotten especially like, well, maybe I can read the raws and get some of the sentiment out of it, and some of them have like the furigana next to them. I'm like, I don't know enough of this word. Well, I could, where I did read one like that was for whatever reason was translated into Spanish, not into English though. And I'm like, well, actually, I can read enough Spanish to actually get by and like more or less understand what's going on here. Read this.
Yeah, there you go. Are you reading something good?
There's like a million of them. I have like literally next to me like a huge stack of comics that I have not gotten to yet.
Yeah, that's. I'm
I-
better about getting through my comics, but like that's just Max, my husband's state of being is just
Yeah.
a constant stack of comics.
I will say like this is my obligatory single episode shout out to Glacier Bay Books, and I just got their second. Once again, not how to pronounce like Glaolia anthology, which is like they do indie manga anthologies. And
Oh wait, that sounds lit. You should post that in the Discord.
yeah, it's Glacier Bay is like amazing, and
Indie manga is a ride.
I've been like craving like because I like manga as much as the next guy, but like it feels like I am reading a lot of it. Feels like even when they're good, it feels like the equivalent of like, well, I'm reading a good Marvel or DC book.
Yeah.
Like it feels of a style.
Yeah, there's definitely like if for anyone listening, like if you read indie manga, it's if you're familiar with Robot Carnival, the sort of series of shorts that
Yeah.
was aired on Sci-Fi back at the turn of the last millennium, I guess technically. It's indie manga is a lot like that. Like it's very kind of a lot of it's kind of surreal and strange and dreamlike, even when it makes sense. And I remember picking up, they did these anthologies called Robot, which were not about robots, but that was what they called them. And like it was crazy because you'd read one, it would be like this beautiful, soothing sort of Ghibli-esque fairy tale and or like streetscape. And then the next one would be like borderline pornographic.
Right, and you
it
know,
was like
but that's what I can get out of like the Fantagraphics catalog any other day.
yeah, it's true.
So, but like, it's not. It's for a country that puts out so many comics. It seems like I know there are what is being offered through the traditional publishers.
Yeah.
I know there is somewhere out there is the Megan Mogg of Japan, and like where is that? Who is? I don't see like Seven Seas publishing the like your weird drug walkabouts mangas, but also maybe they have different.
I mean, I think there's some stuff like that. Like you have like Junji Ito,
Yeah.
and like, but like you kind of have to really keep your eye out. And some of it's not published in English, and also the indie comic scene in Japan is much weirder.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like you're either published by one of these 4 companies on one of their 5 Gorillion imprints, or like you're not. You're like literally making doujinshi, which is
Right.
like. For anyone unfamiliar, it's like zines in Japan, essentially. Like you're just publishing it yourself.
Yeah, their magazine system is way different than what we have here.
Yeah. If you're God, I wonder if I can find it in a. a great person I follow on Twitter who talks a lot about manga and like interesting manga, but also like the manga industry. And I don't remember their name. Oh, actually, I think it's called Sequential Art, which is like okay. I found it. I should do it quickly.
Perfect. This
Wow.
is an episode of finding things quickly.
Yes, finding things. There's like an acceptable amount of time that you can Google something on a radio show, and it's like 30 seconds. And
Yeah.
any longer than that, and it's like now you've screeched everything in the show to a halt.
Right, and we have been like on fire with these links so
yeah,
far.
I'm really impressed with our Google game today.
And like a true radio
Yeah.
show, we are not sharing them with the...
yeah, did you? I'm sorry. Did anyone in the Twitch channel want to know about any of this? Too bad.
No, they gotta look it up themselves. I mean,
But
not
yeah,
necessarily, but
the Twitter handle is manga BD comic ish. It's the title is Sequential Art Fan, and they talk a lot about interesting manga and like what the actual manga market in Japan.
their pinned tweet is licensed Yokohama Karishi Kigo, which is something I always submit. Or I stopped submitting that, honestly.
Yes. So apparently, there's a small print publisher called Starfruit.
Yep, I have I have their whole catalog too.
I need to get some of their stuff. Starfruit. Okay, if you're listening at home, check out Starfruit Books. Very exciting small manga publisher.
Yeah.
But
Remember,
I
Starfruit,
remember-
Glacier Bay, the two we need right now.
yeah,
There was
exactly.
another one, that trio, but I forgot the name of it.
I don't know. I'm a little behind on my manga scene.
Right.
I've disappointed the world as a weeb. But anyway, so I don't know if it was Sequential Art Fan or another one of the people I follow on manga Twitter, but they were talking to Starfruit, like the publisher, and they're like, "Hey, have you looked into Yokohama Shopping? Was it Shopping Dialogue or Arcade?" Anyway,
I honestly,
the
I've seen it the Japanese so much at this point I've
Yeah.
forgotten what the original title is.
Yokohama Kaidashi Kiko.
Yeah.
Like, have they, would you license Yokohama? And they're like, we asked, and like apparently the person who licenses it is asking like a fortune for it, and I think it's sort of in this awful sort of Twilight Zone
Yeah.
because it's it's a beloved manga in Japan with what's for there is maybe kind of a niche audience, but like it's still a very large audience because the manga market there is so much bigger.
Yeah.
But in the United States, like this is sort of a manga without a market. Like it's very much like what they call an iyashike, like a quote unquote a healing manga that's sort
Yeah.
of like slow and like slice of life and like not a lot happens, and it's about the passing of time and the sadness of loss, but like not in a not like a bleak way.
Right.
And so like there's like 50 people in the United States who would really love to read this manga, and then like an audience of maybe 1,000 more who would like it if they saw it in the comic store, and that is it. So like nobody's gonna want to pay the kind of money that they're asking for like this what is in Japan a big classic, but here is like
Right.
an indie hit basically.
It would basically be up to like a big publisher like taking the hit.
Yeah. Like an Evil Hat kind of situation where you have like a couple breadwinner. Evil Hat is an RPG publisher.
Yeah.
for those who
They're
don't
the
know. You have a couple
Fate,
breadwinners,
right?
Yeah. Yes, they publish Fate. That's one of their big ones. Also Blades in the Dark.
yes.
And there's one other big one they publish that's sort of like their like a loss leader. Basically, they have like 3 or 4 books that sell well, and then those books sort of support all of the other books. I know it's also true. Just to go back to RPGs, it's also true of Chaosium and Call of Cthulhu. Like they basically
Right.
use Call of Cthulhu to pay for everything else that they make.
Which today, you gotta publish
that's
you gotta publish indie stuff somehow.
one of my fellow beggars, my Facebook group, I'm begging you to play another RPG. Patrick G. I believe he told me also Goodman Games does that, where they publish 5e Black content, and then that pays for dungeon crawl quests as well. So yeah, it's been RPG news with Kate, I guess.
Which is turns out if you put things like Dungeons and Dragons and Cthulhu on the cover,
Yeah.
it sells more.
Yeah, I know it's a crazy idea, but it just might work. As opposed to the game that I'm writing for, which is like, wait, hold on. Do you have 15 minutes for me to explain this to you?
Right.
Do you like Twin Peaks?
I do
No?
like Twin
Okay.
Peaks.
Well, if you like Twin Peaks, you should check out Unknown Arms. It's like,
What if I only
yeah,
like Blue Velvet?
I don't know. I honestly don't like Twin Peaks that much, but I do love Unknown Armies
Okay.
because it's full of occult nonsense. I've recently been watching Lodge 49, which I feel like Unknown Armies is like Lodge 49 if the magic was a little less subtext. So I don't know if you've seen that show. I feel like
have
there's
not.
another. Oh, it's not like Russian Doll, but it gives off a similar energy of like, oh god, there's a word for this. It's used to describe Roadside Picnic, which is better known as Stalker.
Yeah.
But like these types of stories that are sort of, they're described as like, they feel like how the 20th century feels to a certain kind of person. Just like sort of this element of like postmodern quasi-surrealism that also kind of makes sense at the same time.
All right.
This word is going to, I'm going to remember it like 3 hours after the show and wake up in the middle of the night and, you know, there will be, but yeah. But yeah, it's good. If you like weird stuff, I highly recommend because it's like an internally cohesive kind of weird.
Okay.
I also really like it because it's about like these really driven people. Oh, and also it has like, so if you're an RPG person,
Yes.
you probably know about like what's called stress gauges or shock gauges or madness meters. Like, and Unknown Armies has like this 5-bar shock system with different kinds of trauma, and the way that you experience trauma changes your abilities at various tasks. And like you can take identities so that like that's not your whole deal. Is that your abilities constantly change, but like it creates sort of this interesting meta narrative about how the experience of seeing really difficult or fucked up shit like changes who you are.
All right.
And I found it like weirdly helpful for me at a time when I was going through some tough stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, it turns out like going through trauma like actually, you know, has effects on you, and you shouldn't. You don't have to just like pretend that it doesn't. So yeah, I like it a lot. Sorry,
Okay.
I went off on kind of a side.
No. I have a semi-related question from that point. Are you familiar with like the Call of Cthulhu, Call of Trail of Cthulhu, those games, like as systems?
I've played Call of Cthulhu before.
Okay.
I have not played any Trail of Cthulhu or any of the other Gumshoe games. It's on my to-do list, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah. Okay.
If I'm being honest, I sometimes have problems with cosmic horror as a genre. I find it terrifying.
So that leads to my important question. Like, so for instance, you know, in those games, how you would roll for sanity on occasion, should you
Yes.
witness something horrific?
Yes.
If I imagine my players were to walk across a bridge, some event happens and they turn around, the bridge is gone. Would I make my players roll for sanity?
I haven't played enough Call of Cthulhu to answer that question. I could answer the question in Unknown Armies.
What did they do?
That's helpful.
What in Unknown Armies? What would you?
So in Unknown Armies, you have different kinds of stress. If you crossed a bridge and you turned around and something that had been was no longer, it would be what's called an unnatural check. So you would roll. So if you're unhardened enough in the unnatural, you simply wouldn't roll. You just have to. I won't go into the nitty gritty of it too much, but basically you have to roll one of your protective identities or one of your skills that's related to a shock gauge, and then if you fail that roll, then you have a flight, or freeze response to the event. So like in this case, because something weird and unnatural is happening, it's an unnatural roll. If you see something that's, you know, fucked up in a way of like violence, like you see somebody get shot, like that would be a violence check. So like depending on what type of stress you're experiencing, it changes what shock gauge it impacts.
This is this may or may not have happened in a session some time ago that repeatedly comes up.
Yeah.
But
I have.
we are,
So what
Kate,
are,
not to
yeah.
interrupt you, but we are we are at time.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, this
so,
I know.
Yeah, it's easy to get me to talk way too much.
It flies by. So the
Yeah.
last thing I will ask you, that I ask of every guest is, and I guess we've touched on a lot of this so far, but what would you recommend to someone that what piece of art or hobby or anything else that is not a game that someone should get into?
Are we talking like a hobby or a specific like
Or it could
like
be
a show or a book?
Could be a show, could be a book, could be a song, could be a hobby, could be anything. Just not
Okay.
not even necessarily related to games. Just something else.
So the other big thing I do in my life, less so now, I guess, but still somewhat, is activism. So I would suggest that you join a local campaign. That could be DSA, USA.org, or if there's a promising candidate or like a rent control campaign or a mutual aid group, whatever appeals to you, check that out. That's a really great way to spend your time. And you can, if you don't have a ton of time, you can do it once a month instead of every week, or you can do it just during campaign season. You can knock a few doors. Every little bit that you do really matters.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be.
Does that count?
Yes,
as
it
a
does.
hobby?
It counts.
Okay.
It doesn't need to become your entire life or identity, but doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can't do it a little.
Yeah.
Something is
and-
something, Something's not nothing.
Yeah. And being too into organizing can make things hard for you, but like doing it at least somewhat, that made my life feel a lot less bleak during these tough times. So I would recommend that.
Well, thanks for being here, Kate.
Thank you for talking with me.
No problem.
I had a lovely time.
We'll see you again in like an hour when we're all here as a group hanging out. But for now, we're going to get to our next guest. And for now, we're going to go to break. Goodbye. Hello and welcome back to Indie Apocalypse Radio. I am here with my second guest, Brandon. Hey, Brandon, how you doing?
Oh, hey, I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing good. Having a good
Good.
time. Hello.
I've been listening to you for like the last hour or so. 45 minutes. So I know you're good.
Yeah, good. I'm doing fantastic. I'm a radio host. I have to be doing fantastic. If I'm not doing
That's
good,
true.
this whole thing falls apart, and it can't very well fall
God.
apart. So you here, Brandon? Hello. Are a
Hello.
I didn't mention previously. I guess it was implied that Kate had not, but you are a contributor to Indie Apocalypse, of the very first one, even
Yeah, gosh, and that was what about
a year ago.
a year ago. Change. I don't know. Time is weird now, but yeah, my little RPG Beauty of Poppies.
So I got to ask. Usually I would ask, how did you hear about Indie Apocalypse? But that you didn't hear about it. I emailed you about it. So I got to ask, why did you answer my email out of like the hundreds of people that did not answer it?
Because I'm smarter than them. And like, hey, this guy, he's going places. I think part of it was that I wanted the game to have a bit of life past this, and the idea of like having, being involved in something cool like Indie Apocalypse, right? Like that's a lot of street cred to be like, yeah, I'm in a indie gaming zine called Indie Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Like that is a much more like, that's a work smarter, not harder way of my game having some life that I don't have to constantly be thumping its chest to make happen.
Right. And
Right.
I thought my chest once a month at this point now, so I don't even have to thump very much.
So yeah, after like the game was in the Connecticut Festival of Indie Games, I'm like, I like this game, but I'm ready to move on.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really nice way to sort of like kind of tie the bow on that project.
Okay, yeah, because that is something I want to do with the zine, is keep things kind of like a permanent piece of curation, so that creators don't have to worry about constantly promoting them forever, but also it still exists, and it still exists in a form that's not just like coverage on a website somewhere that said website may or may not exist.
Well, and I think that something I think about a lot is like the sheer disposability of so much like art, and whether or not that's a good thing, right? Like I think part of what is kind of fun about, some like little games like this or comic books or whatever is you can kind of pop it open and see like, oh, okay, do I like this? Do I not? Whatever.
Yeah.
And you can move forward with your life, right? Whereas thinking about something like a movie, right? Like I have friends who are never going to get over the Star Wars sequels, and that's because you only get so many. I mean, granted, now we get so many Star Wars movies, but I think you take my point, right? That like, that's not something we can move. So I really love the idea of like having art be part of our daily lives that way. And I think things like zines are a really great way to approach that.
I fundamentally think all art is utterly disposable. For lack of a better word, in that nothing is essential. I mean, you can there are lessons to be learned from every piece of art, but it's not like it's complicated. Basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to agree, but if I spend $60 on a game, it pains me not to see it through to more or less the end.
Oh no! My secret is I don't spend $60 on games anymore.
Well, yeah, there is that. So yeah, I think that's part of it. Is like I think that a lot of what I think about as far as like my work in general is like, how do I figure out like what is a price point that sort of gets buy-in from my audience commensurate to like what I think the text or whatever the thing I'm working on is.
Yeah.
So yeah, which like brings us back to like, why did I say yes to Indie Apocalypse? Like every once in a while I get a little money from it.
Yeah.
And which is like staggering, right? Like you know, I've written a couple books. Like sometimes I get a little bit of money from those too,
Right.
and it's like I am so thrilled because even if it's like just a few bucks here and there, um, it like so many people never get the opportunity to make any money off their work like that, even when the work really deserves it,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it's something that it's nice to even that little bit makes a big difference in how I feel about how the work is valued in the world.
Right. And sometimes, like, yeah, games don't have like the penny royalty checks that come in because you went a commercial once 5 years ago.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but I think it needs more like incremental, like small, like not everything has to be a massive runaway success in order to be something.
Well, I think that's just bad for industries in general,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I promise I don't want to like spend your whole show pontificating, but I think that's why like when we look at Hollywood, right? Like every movie that is at all big has to be a huge success,
Yeah.
right? Because every movie, at least this is how it feels to me, every movie a studio makes is a tentpole now.
Right. Well, everyone wants to make a franchise now.
Right. And I think games are at least as bad about that, right? It's like, looking at, even we'll leave like CD Projekt Red off to the side. That's its own nightmare. But like when I look at, Naughty Dog and Last of Us Part 2, like if Part 2 had not sort of made as much money as it did basically on its prestige, because I played it and like I have a lot of like mixed feelings about it. Like that's it. Like that tanks the studio.
Right. Yeah, I have no opinion. I never played it. I played like an hour of the first one. I said that's enough for me. I'm fine.
What about it did you bounce off of?
I mean, it just wasn't interesting, and I thought like there was something like the stealth mechanics rode me weird. Like it felt like there was some unintuitiveness to it, or so like it didn't connect with me. Like whether it was just me bouncing off of it, or but also like I don't care. I don't have that like built-in. I have to care about this because it's popular. So
Yeah.
that doesn't motivate me at all to go forwards.
Yeah, I mean, good.
I'm like, I don't need to see this because it's relevant or it's like discourse. Like, so if it doesn't interest me, I just stop playing it.
Yeah, and sometimes I do that, but I think like I did buy into Last of Us 2, especially that first one. I really loved that first game.
Yeah.
After the second one, I'm like, well, it's half off, and I was really curious. And then like I thought that a lot of the conversations people were having around it or complaining about it were just not that interesting. Like they were focusing on just the weirdest things. But speaking of weird stuff, I thought I might answer the Call of Cthulhu question from earlier.
Yes, burning Call of Cthulhu question. I need to know.
Word. So you have like a sanity. So Call of Cthulhu is a roll under percentile system.
Yes.
So if you don't roll under your sanity score, it drops by whatever that thing is.
So what I'm asking is, I just crossed a bridge. Me and my party just crossed a bridge.
Yep.
We turned around, and now, hey, this bridge is gone. What happened? Yeah, Kate points out. I never did ask what dice you rolled in that. You do also roll under in Unknown Armies. That's the burning question is which number of dice do you roll? I forgot to ask, but that answers that question. So the bridge turns around, and my game master says, "You got to roll for sanity." Do we have to roll for sanity? And we're like, let's say we're like 16 sessions deep into this, and like a mummy's already punched a guy's head around.
I'm having a hard time imagining characters lasting that long in this game, but I take your point, and I think the best answer is yes, but it wouldn't be a very difficult role.
Okay, this
right, like I think there'd be some modifiers on that of like, huh, well, that's a thing.
Okay, that is something that
Yeah.
comes up often. So I'm like, well, I've got RPG experts here. Where I need to ask, do we roll for this stupid bridge? I think I'm neutral on I'm a neutral party in this situation. I don't care whether I roll for the bridge or not. But I'm also like a guy who tries to like role play through a game and tries to roll as few dice as possible.
Yeah, rolling dice is for nerds.
Yeah.
So, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think like Call of Cthulhu, it's weird because it's almost like it's a game that doesn't realize like where its fun could be. When I think like, what if there was a game like there's that Simpsons Halloween special that's The Shining.
Yeah.
Like, what if that game always ended in all the characters wigging out like Homer does in that episode? Like, I think like that seems like so much more fun a game to me than what if D&D but just Shoggoth?
Yeah, I guess I think a lot of that requires like what the players bring to the table. Because if your players, like, I've had this discussion, I'm sure even on this show before, like when you play, how willing are you typically a player or do you typically run games?
For Cthulhu, I'm usually a player.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how much are you and your fellow players? How willing are you to lose?
I've gotten much better at it, and I think would still be the worst at it.
Yeah.
So I think pretty good. I think that like, but also especially with that game, like that's what you sign up for,
Right?
Right. And we all knew that going into it. Whereas with that same group, the game we played before that was the Telsorian Witcher system, and I ran that one, and they were a bit more prepared for their characters to die than I was.
Okay.
That surprised me about myself. I'm like, no, I'm much more interested in like how your character navigates having a prosthesis than I am you dying, right? Or I think it's funnier if you have to like hold your breath in this barrel of wine so that you can't expose any of your skin to air and it immediately catches fire.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's so much more fun a question than like I don't know. There were just so many like narrative threads I was invested. So I'm like, no, you all continue to get tormented unless you want your character to, bite the big one.
Yeah. That very much varies in like terms of games that we've played. We've played like old like OSR style games where I've had character, and it was basically only me, and I would die at least once per session, sometimes twice in a single session. And I would just roll up.
That's what you get when your adventuring party is Spinal Tap, right? Like,
yeah. I was a single cleric, and I would just re-roll the exact same cleric. It's like, well, I'm still the cleric. This time, I touched a pillar, and my brain went to space. This time, I whipped myself in the mirror to death. This time, I dropped a telescope on me. And, like, it's fun, honestly, to be this weird disaster prone. And I also, like, not metagame, but, like, contextually, I made it so my character is a reincarnation of all its previous selves every time it died. I don't know.
And it's more fun that way.
Yeah. It's an interesting divide. Maybe it's the kind of people who are drawn to Indiepocalypse because that's the answer I find more often. It's like, oh yeah, we love to lose here at our role playing table. But I've had conversations with people who are just like describing their way they cheated this, like they gamed like the D&D system to give themselves good numbers and good rolls. I'm like, wouldn't it be better if you had a bad roll and did bad?
It doesn't feel good to be bad at D&D. I mean, yeah, I think that what a lot of that boils down to is like your approach to the conceit, right? Like, I think part of what I really love about role-playing games in general, right, is that failing forward is so much more fun, and the systems tend to be sort of loose enough so that works, right? So that you can just have, Bumpkins the cleric the 5th.
Yeah.
Um,
I also have
but
a
also,
weird
like-
mindset where I'm like in my mind, level 1 characters always have to be amateurs, so they're often like young or old or just like otherwise inept because they have bad stats. So you can't be
Right.
an ultra badass with like at level 1.
Yeah, they were the badass in their village, and yeah, I mean, I think that another part of that is like how willing you are to buy into the swords and sorcery thing, right? Like D&D is preposterous, and I love that about it. And that's why like it's too much fun. It's too good to take seriously, right? At least in this way of like I want to be cool. I think
Yeah.
like in my own work, like the desire for particular kinds of like cool is an aesthetic I'm trying to get away from. So yeah, I say that, but
Yeah.
I like rule of cool in terms of like chainsaw bayonet is cool. It doesn't make sense, but
Sure.
chainsaw bayonet's cool.
So do you also do tabletop design?
Yeah, I have an itch page with let's see, I have a sort of collaborative comic booky storytelling game, and then I have one where it's basically like, oh, what if here I can. I'm not sure if I should put it like in our Discord or on the Twitch stream. I'll put it here. You can decide.
Yeah.
So
I don't like to talk to them in the Discord. In the Twitch stream, it feels like it gives them too much power.
Power. Okay.
I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of continuing that and fostering those parasocial relationships.
Sure. Well, in that case,
they can go themselves to brandonlsitchling.itch.io.
Excellent. So, and then I have another one where it's like, oh, what if Netflix is queer? I was like angry and queer instead of just like politely gay.
Yeah.
Is that... yeah.
No, what is that in terms of like play style?
I mean, for Heroes All, I was very much interested in what slice of life storytelling would look like, and kind of figuring out how comic books are very good at sort of keeping everyone on an even keel in terms of power, right? Like the idea that Jimmy Olsen can hang out with Superman, or that Archie can hang out with the Punisher, and like they can exist in the same story and move forward. I was really interested in figuring out ways to sort of mechanize character traits, and then as you like use whatever your power is, right, you recharge that ability in a rules level at least by being in conflict with another player character. I was very interested in sort of getting role playing around the table to happen a bit more. For Very Pleasant Queer Makeover Show, what I was going for with that is I actually drew a lot from James D'Amato's game Millennial Apartment Hunters, and yeah, I was pretty much just interested in the space of like, great, so if and a little bit from the Adventures of Baron Munchausen TRPG.
Oh, okay.
So there's a bit of like a currency thing going on where basically you're just trying to be sort of like the grungiest sort of angriest crust punk gays you can, and I mean, part of it is just sort of dismantling the we're just like you sensibility.
Right. The very commercialized presentation.
Right. In terms of playstyle, it's basically just the four we'll say experts just ganging up on one person who is playing someone who is somewhere between, we'll say, decked out entirely in camo or Pete Buttigieg, somewhere in that spectrum. and seeing what like hilarity and tension arises from those dynamics.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a moment.
It's okay.
So, hello. How you doing?
Hello. I'm
Yes.
doing okay.
I don't know where. So, you make these tabletop RPG games. Your game you're working on right now, Habit of Force, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you sent me a theme for that. So, what is that about? Broadly speaking, we are not like a PR show.
Broadly speaking, giant robots fighting in space.
Okay, perfect.
I was interested. Yeah, I was interested in sort of the matchmaking stuff from say Fire Emblem Awakening, but
Yeah.
every game since then has done it.
That's
so
okay.
I'm like,
so
oh, what?
Can we sidebar here for a moment on Fire Emblem?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
How familiar are you with Fire Emblem?
I would say from Awakening on,
Okay.
pretty aware.
Okay, so
but like if you have questions, and I've
Blazing
played
Blade or Binding Blade.
No, that's
Okay.
I think I played the first Ike game.
Okay.
Path of Radiance.
Yes, Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. So, because what I was going to ask is they, so far as I am aware, they typically had Fire Emblem games would come in pairs, and they would have shared pair mechanics across those kind of things. And they would be like thematic pairs, sometimes literal, like the Ike, the Tellius games are literal, like one after another. Same with like Blazing and Binding Blade. The latter,
right?
The former being a sequel to the latter, and all the prequel rather. That was just showed up here as Fire Emblem. It's where Binding Blade is where your pal Roy comes from. But when it got to the matchmaking, I'm like, oh, okay. So matchmaking, there'll be 2 games that have matchmaking in it, and then they all have them that now.
They kind of do, not nearly to the extent that Awakening and the one, Fates.
I guess I've been weirded out. I've never liked the dating aspect of Fire Emblem, or like I don't like this weird dating aspect that's been built onto Fire Emblem as much.
I loved the way it was handled in Awakening, and then past that, I absolutely agree. It felt very shoehorned in afterwards. But so to that end, I decided that since it was giant robots, I wanted to build in a sort of rivalry system.
Okay.
So the second half of the game, your plot is changed depending on which rivalry you've cultivated. So I'm, because I'm clever and precious about these things, I'm calling it a hating sim.
Yeah.
And because I wanted to tap into some of that like Amuro Ray Char Aznable feeling.
That's what I was wondering. Like, what is your key robots in space rivalry? And it's them.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love, and the game doesn't have we don't have the scope to do this sort of thing, but I love this idea of like a hatred that spans decades.
Yeah.
That survived even through them being technically allies, and fighting on the same army. Like I think that is, I love that. That's fascinating to me. And I wanted to sort of play around with some of those ideas.
I mean, it especially helps to survive that hate if one of the 2 ends, one is like a petulant child, the other is a real piece of shit.
And some days you're one, some days you're the other.
That's the beauty of their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I showed toward the beginning of the project, I showed my team Char's counterattack, and I think some of them might have seen a Gundam before, like maybe some Gundam Wing or Iron Blooded Orphans.
I was gonna say, but that's also Gundam is also a weird thing where it's like, is Iron Blooded Orphans Universal Century?
No.
Okay, so like they're not even seeing Universal Century stuff, so they don't even have like that same context.
Right. Well, and that's what I thought was like kind of funny, right? Is watching their reactions just getting dropped into it. They had sort of a fresh understanding of the characters that even my sort of limited knowledge of the original series gave me sort of this cushion of memory that filled in blanks in the motivations for me.
I mean, that was also, to be fair, my Gundam trajectory as a teen was Gundam Wing aired on Toonami, and then we drove like an hour and a half to the mall that had the Sunset Video in it because Sunset Video sold anime.
Right.
And we bought Char's Counterattack. Char. Yeah.
Yeah.
For like $40 because that's how much anime cost back then.
Yeah. What a. And now there's a Blu-ray rip of it on YouTube.
I mean, even the Blu-ray itself is probably only like $15.
Well, yeah, and God, I mean, that's the thing is like talking with the kids these days, and it's like, you don't know, you cannot know how good you have it, but at least as far as liking anime goes. But on the other hand, I feel like there's a lot to sift through.
Yes.
Where back when, at least when I was a teenager, I was desperate enough that I didn't sift. It's just like, cool, this my video store has like the 3rd volume of Violence Jack. Sure, whatever, I'll watch this.
I guess I like Orphan now.
Whoa. Let's not.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'm like at the right age where I was like, as I was getting into anime, fan subs were more readily available, so I could just go online and watch fan subs.
Yeah.
I wasn't in like, I didn't have to deal with fucking Miami Jack or whatever his name was, and like anime convention bootlegs.
Sure, although I love Miami Jack sounds like a man who definitely wears a leisure suit and is very dangerous.
I'm gonna have to look up his name because let's go back, keep going because I don't know. I think his name is Miami Jack. It's Miami something.
But it's too good to correct yourself on. Well, and that's why I think like part of what I've been trying to do with like the visual style is harken back to that late '80s, early '90s. Partly just because it's a bit grungier. And I'm looking for something that's a bit rougher around the edges.
Back when the hair was much bigger.
So I know I didn't. It's like, oh, I didn't know that a cartoon character could use Aquanet, but there we go. That's Robotech, baby.
It was Miami Mike.
Miami Mike.
Miami
God,
Mike.
yeah.
Remember what Miami Mike? Yeah. There's actually, oh God, I forgot who the. I know what her avatar picture is, but I forget the place, like the actual name. Someone did the research of looking up Miami Mike and like finding out what Miami Mike did at Dragon Con.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing on Google a picture of little like, Goku. No, that must be Goten. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on because that is little Goku and that is Goten and Piccolo.
This just, I feel like, when you say Miami Mike and the thing that pops into my head is Leisure Suit Larry.
Yeah.
And I'm just so uncomfortable by that.
Anime Nostalgia Podcast. There it is.
Okay.
They did the work to find out who Miami Mike was and what Miami Mike did at Dragon Con.
Oh, God. Do we want to know?
I don't think it's as bad as you think it is. I think he just like stole rips or something.
Okay. he stole from the thieves.
Listen. Back in those days, they were doing a valuable service.
It was the Wild West.
Somebody had. If I wasn't translating Fushi Yugi, who was going to?
No one was.
Yeah. As an editor's note, I'm not sure what Fushi Yugi is, other than it being the name of an anime from like the 80s or 90s.
It's pretty cool. It's sort of it has like that same like very initially the same setup of like Escaflowne, like teenage girl gets transported to another world, but what she gets transported to is high fantasy China.
Oh, yeah. Yes. There's been a lot of talk lately how about isekai used to just be teenage girls going to places, as opposed to sad men who just want to be strong and do all the ladies.
And all of these things, like I like going places. I like I like lifting heavy things. This is all relatable. Um, I think like what's funny about like Teenage Girl Goes to Place is it's sort of the same arc as old horror movies, right? Where the first like 15 to 20 minutes of something like Night of the Living Dead, like Barbara is a character, and then she's just a quivering mess for the rest of the film. I think it's the same with a lot of those anime where it starts and they give you all of this personality of hers to get you to buy into the show, and then literally her heart is the MacGuffin. It's like, cool. Well, I'm glad you're here to unlock the dragon armor or whatever.
Well, somebody has to.
That's fair.
I was surprised when I had watched, because I had never seen Night of the Living Dead, but I had known that line about how they're all coming for Barbara, and it was used as a joke in like things to joke on horror, and I didn't realize in the context of the original movie it's a joke.
Yeah.
Which was like a weird thing to come to after seeing it in pop culture for so long.
I had very much the same experience when I finally read Streetcar Named Desire after seeing the Simpsons episode Streetcar Named Marge so many times. Like I read this really upsetting play that has like a lot of sexually charged violence right underneath the surface. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this would actually be a really terrible thing to make a dancey stage musical out of. Wow, Simpsons, you went hard.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. They were funny. There was a time when there was funny writers in that show.
Yeah, that's another, like, in the pre-show when we were talking about like going back to stuff we liked as teenagers. It's like, ooh, I don't feel good about this now. I've had now with Simpsons on Disney Plus and like just everything that's online. I'm like, wow, I cannot tolerate this anymore. Some of it Simpsons are like mentioning Gundam Wing. It's like watching that. And it's like, you know, I'm not sure I know what's happening in this show. So
back when you have nothing else, what are you gonna do but watch the thing you have?
Absolutely. And you know, in the case of that one, if I love the idea. I wish we could get an anime now that it's like, hey, what if a boy band also piloted giant robots? But I would want it to be a very different series than what Gundam Wing is.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I am not the big anime watcher around here. I could not tell you much about anime.
I really haven't been for a long time, but I feel like I just kind of grabbed the steering wheel on that one and said, no, we're going off the otaku off ramp, and that's just how it's going to be.
I'm gonna go revisit my past. Now, speaking of revisiting our past or revisiting any future or past that exists. What would you, now that we've approached the end of our half hour, what would you recommend to all the gamers out there?
I'll speak pretty broadly. So I've been watching more Park Chan-wook films lately, just because, like, you know, let's see. Like his film, The Handmaiden, came really recommended on like my Netflix algorithm.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, I liked, you know, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Old Boy. So then I watched that and Thirst. And those are pretty intense movies. But, and especially, oh, sorry, I see Boz in the chat. I'm like, there are things about Thirst where I'm like, I'm not sure if this is good, but it knows exactly what it wants to be.
Yeah.
And it pursues that with a bulldog tenacity that I can't help but admire. So I guess what I'm saying is check out like his movies that aren't like Old Boy and The Host, right? Like the couple everyone's seen. Like check out Thirst, Handmaiden, I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay. Like all these really tremendous, lesser known and sometimes harder to stomach films.
Yeah, watch hard to watch movies. I always recommend it.
Yeah, basically.
Make yourself have a bad time. And on that, this was a good time. And on that note,
Thanks.
we're gonna go back to break. Goodbye, everyone. I'll see you in 3 minutes and 36 seconds.
常識が軒並み恋しい子常備安心マニュアル本頭の中どう思うでしもいい正直ドン引きよあドンディキドン足つってバレンのもう時期よサスペンス犯人が被害者当人っぽいかなりのパーセンテージBounce on the beat 遅い Dance like a me You saw me Follow me Yo everybody 既存の答えこねくり回せ裸足でかけるアンチテーゼすぐにこびて哀れまたか騙す己どれが間違い探し当てて誰かまくし立てるレイジャッジ美味しい毒の時にはジャッジ苦いばかりの正論ばっかジャッジ決まりきったもの差しではいずり回るどこぞの差し数でムス走るデンジャラス回路飲み込みが今毎回外れるといい飲み込みがいい衝動は昔の話公式マニュアル通りに1から10まで完璧いつでも答えを常備ダメならどうするあいつのせいだと言ったりこいつのせいだと言ったりあんたのせいだし小さい世の中そんなに甘くないんだよもういいよ悲しい子正直ドン引き常識バレンのもうじきよディキドン365日すり合わす愛嬌と愛想振りまく意味不明なのに根回し言われた通り皿回しモンキー行儀だけの可愛いそんなんばっかじゃんツイートばっかして飼いならされたマーケット安心キーセオリー頭キンキンか弱いあなた方言わぬが仏たい Bounce on the beat Dance like a meすぐにこびて哀れまたか騙す己どれが間違いかじゃなくて何をしたいか削り回れジャッジ美味しい毒の時にはジャッジ苦いばかりの正論ばっかジャッジ決まりきったもの差しではいずり回るどこぞの差し数でムス走るデンジャラス回路飲み込みがいい毎回外れるといい飲み込みがいい衝動は昔々の話じゃない今でもあるはずだぜ常識が軒並み恋しい子常備安心マニュアル本頭の中どう思うでしもいい正直ドン引きよアウトンディキドン足つってバレンのもうじきよサスペンス犯人が被害者当人っぽいかなりのパーセンテージジョージ最近正直よ見本なんてもういらないでしょそれがあなたよジョージ
Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. I'm here with guest number 3 here, Casey Weeks. Casey, how you doing?
Howdy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. What's going on? How's your night so far? Or presumptuous to call it night because it's night here. How's your January 23rd at the moment?
It's doing excellent. I stayed up all night playing Jackbox on Discord, and then we turned on video chat, and we're like, oh, we can like see people again, and we just talked until 6 a.m. and then I slept all day, so now I'm here.
Perfect. That's an ideal way to live a life, which is sleep all day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I got to ask you first off, because this is now finally I can ask this question again. Hey, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
So I had heard of Indiepocalypse on the Vine for a while, just like here and there.
Yeah.
And it never quite the wheels never quite hit the ground with that. Like it didn't catch. And then
You're telling
then
me.
I just Well, yeah, that's kind of how it goes. Like, but when you show people that you are consistent and you stick with it, people start to pay attention. And I think when I noticed Indiepocalypse again, and I was like, and so I started inspecting, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling really good about this now. And that's when I kind of jumped in there.
Oh,
So it was
cool.
like it took like the third time I heard of it to really jump in.
They're like, this thing is both not a scam and will continue on month after month.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, when you show people that you're going to stick around, that's when they start to give you credibility for sure.
Oh, perfect. Or you've already been around and then you just get instant credibility for having already existed for a while.
I suppose so.
So when you start something new.
Yeah, starting something new is one of the hardest things possible, and
Yeah.
that's y'all been talking this whole time about, like you're trying to create weird stuff or stuff on your own, and it's really really difficult to get noticed, and that's why Indiepocalypse in the title itself is like there's so much stuff out there that where it's almost like everyone's drowning each other out,
Right.
and throughout history, bundles have been created to overcome this problem.
Yeah.
They did it with writing in the like early 1900s. They did it with cable networks, I guess in the 80s, somewhere
Yeah.
around there. Like indie games really needs this, so you're providing a valuable service.
That's part of like when I describe it, I describe it using like fiction anthologies as like the touchstone of like, oh no, this is just what I'm doing. I'm just making something that's existed forever.
Yeah, it's an answer to a problem we have of there just being so much good shit out there, and we don't
Right.
know we don't know where to go, where to turn, or whatever.
Right, and there needs to be like a semi-curatorial space. It's like, no, I mean, for this month, at least look at this 10 pieces of good shit,
Exactly.
and then we can kind of like work our way from there and try and figure out, hey, we got to slowly change the space because you can't rely on like IGN to cover your small weird indie games, so you have to foster other small weird indie sites.
Yeah, and at this size, at least I'm referring to myself.
Yeah.
Like it's like a support group. Like everyone's kind of like talking about, how are we gonna get noticed, and
Right.
show me your stuff, I'll show you mine, and we'll have a good time.
Exactly, because you can't. There's just not enough space. You can't compete with like the newest Fortnite skin.
No, I can't.
The-
I guess for reference, I was just in the latest Indiepocalypse, I believe.
Yes, 13. No, wait, no,
Yeah.
I'm working on 13. It was 12.
Okay. Yeah, I was in 12.
Yes, you were in 12, and your game was
Metaform. Yeah.
Yes. I'm doing a good job at remembering like 120 games.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, well, I guess for a quick reference, it was a game about kind of like based on my dreams of being locked inside all the time
Yeah.
because of the obvious recent events of wanting an escape and continually like running into people and how they're coping with the event out there in the game. It's just nobody says what it is. They just
Right.
So everyone is like everyone you run into is like coping with what's going on in their own way.
Yes, and it's a kind of, it's not a text parser, but kind of a text parser. But
Yeah,
not
I was
quite.
thinking of doing like a text input game, but I was like, this might be a little too esoteric for people to jump in for like a small game like this. So what
Yeah.
if I provided the words for you?
Yeah.
And within that, I was like, wait, words have multiple meanings. So instead of giving you like an eyeball icon and a point and click, I'm actually going to literally write the word eyeball. And then
Yeah.
eyeball has two meanings. So it's your eyeball, and you can eyeball objects and things like that.
Yeah, and then you kind of start to understand the game's like own internal language.
Right. And then the very first puzzle that you solve that kind of, I think, gives away the idea is like the wind blows in through the window and you see that your clock is stopped, and then
Yeah.
then you use the word wind clock, and it's instead of being wind, it's now wind, and that's the big O moment for
Yeah.
the game.
And also, I really love the illustrations of that game.
Yeah, I worked with Cohill on that. He's a fantastic artist. I worked on a few games with him.
Yeah, that goes on. I am continually surprised at like what comes in to Indiepocalypse, I'm just like, oh, what are you people doing? I'm just slumming it down here. Why are you doing so many of these cool games to me?
So you're an indie developer as well, right?
I mean, I haven't in such a long time.
Uh,
I did aspirationally buy a dialogue thing for Game Maker, but
oh,
yeah.
so we were in a similar vein.
Oh, you also bought that?
No, so I mean a dialogue-based
Yeah.
thing.
Well, no, this is like a dialogue system for like RPGs or just like general dialogue systems.
Mm-hmm.
It had been like my albatross, if you will, for game makers, like building out a dialogue system because I want to use it so frequently, and I was spoiled growing up on AGS, which is made for like replicating Sierra games and had an amazing dialogue system.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the game Metaform itself was actually, it was originally like the early version of it was part of a jam called the Revival Jam,
Yeah.
and it was to revive an old game idea and like turn it into something new. And the problem with the old game was my dialogue system. I homespun it, and it was terrible and really hard to update and do anything with.
Yeah.
So I looked around for new dialogue engines, and I ended up using the dialogue engine for Unity.
Okay.
I emailed the developer of it before I started. I was like, I have this idea about combining words and then just feeding it into the parser, basically. And he was like, oh, that's really interesting. You could try this. And he wrote me a bunch of pseudocode, and that
Yeah.
kind of started the game. And then he kind of became like a really good partner during the game. Like anytime I had a question, he would like write me up some like example code of how I could make anything work. So
Yeah.
like he was like an unsung hero behind that game as well. Like it was his dialogue engine. It was the dialogue engine used for Disco Elysium as
Okay.
well.
What is the dialogue system have a name?
Yeah, it's called Dialogue Engine for Unity, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a very
Says what it
generic
is.
name. Yeah. It might be Dialogue System for Unity.
Okay.
I can look it up. But yeah, no, it was great that he was so willing to help, and he's very passionate. So I'm speaking of him highly because he will help you if you ever want to use his dialogue engine.
Well, perfect. I think that kind of thing is like essential for independent developers going forward. It's just kind of like you said earlier, building a community
Hmm.
and getting people together, because really people need to help each other, because
Yes.
most people don't have like the resources to like go out on their own and just like everyone goes into a room and just starts yelling their own thing. It doesn't really help anybody, and it's just like
Right. It's
Turn-
it's like everybody gets their turn
right.
to yell for a bit, and everyone watches and goes, I really like that you were thinking about this and you did that, and that's
Right.
inspiring.
Yeah, and
Good.
no. The unspoken Indiepocalypse rules: if you're saying something, and I keep on talking, just keep going, and I'll shut up.
Well, I don't want to be rude. And I forgot my train of thought. So
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Yeah, especially because that kind of like system does not reveal the fact that some people have money to buy microphones and megaphones and yell a lot louder than everybody else.
Hmm.
But it's a lot harder to see, like for instance, when everybody pretends they're a game studio, which is actually a studio with like community managers and teams and budgets, and which one is just a student who created their own logo.
Hmm. Yeah, the brand I use, Ace.
Yeah.
It's kind of like aesthetics minus the rest of the word,
Right.
and that is basically a name I use to refer to the work that I do, but other people always come. Like there's a shifting group of people that come in, just like creative people. I'm just like, hey, you want to work on a thing?
Yeah.
They're like, sure. And I'm trying to put it under one moniker, but it's basically just like my stuff with other people that come in for different games.
Yeah, and like the outside perception of that is always weird. I get a lot of questions that imply that Indiepocalypse is more than one person.
I thought it totally was.
Oh.
Sure.
You thought I had like a team or something?
Well, yeah. I mean, it looks so. Well, I don't want to sound like I'm just like praising you to the high skies or something, but it looks like you've really got like this whole team. Like, oh, you'll send it to the submissions team, and then we've got this guy making the art and the art team, and
Oh, well,
Yeah,
the art team.
we've got the judges.
The art team is me on. I mean, I guess like the unofficial art team is people like what's their Twitter handle? I think the Twitter handle is like Resh Monster, who I follow, who I met I think at IndieCade, and just like they post, they retweet a lot of artists. So I guess technically they're part of the art team because then I use those
There you go.
retweets to get artists. Because I just like, but really the art team is me emailing people and saying, I like your art. Can I pay you to make a cover? And
Right.
they often
Yeah.
say yes.
Yeah, I mean, like giving it a name in general is going to make it seem like it's
Yeah.
a team, unless it was just like, Andrew's fantastic games that he recommends.
Andrew presents Indie Apocalypse.
Right.
Listen, I'm not.
Then
There was a time when I wanted to call this zine, when I jokingly referred to it as Reflections, except people get paid for their inclusion. But I'm not such a type to plaster my name all over everything, because I hate doing that. I try. That's like the weird balancing act I have of, I need to get a bigger platform so I can then distribute that platform to other people. But I don't want people to focus on me, but they need to focus on me so that I can then direct that focus.
Yeah, you're the one holding the torch,
Right.
and we're following along and such.
And it's like a complicated balancing act of trying to not build need to develop a cult of personality so that people pay attention to you, but then not wanting people to only pay attention to you as the figurehead.
Exactly.
Because I don't care about what people think about me. I don't want anything to do with people. I just want people. This all started because when I was developing games, I was looking at them like, shit, I'm not going to make any money making the kind of games I want to make. What if I made the market myself?
Right. Yeah.
And thus Indie Apocalypse was born.
And it's you're talking about like you want to kind of step back from the title as well. It's like that's why I use the name Eighths instead of just saying like games by Casey Weeks, because I work with all these like really talented people,
Right?
And I don't want to just make it look like it, and it kind of feels like that sometimes because it's on my itch page.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
like all these people are like, they're making amazing work, and I'm just putting these games up on just my page.
Yeah.
So and I'm very careful to say these are games I worked on, not my games.
Right, and it can be very easy for people to like associate it with the first name on the title.
Right, and I had that problem. Do you know the GMTK?
Yeah.
Game Jam.
Yes.
So in 2019, our game was in the top 20, and he basically said, "Thank you, Casey Weeks and team." And I was like, ugh, and like looking at the rest of the team, like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And now there's like almost 1 million views on that video, and I'm just like, hey guys, hey.
Sorry, did you try changing your Twitter handle to an team?
Yeah. Hello, An Team.
Yes, we've rebranded our collective as An Team. Yeah, that sucks. But that's And honestly, I think that's just like expediency and oversight on whoever that. I mean, I am vaguely. That's like. I assume I would say that's a guy, but that's probably also a team of people.
Nope.
That like presumably, I mean, like there's probably still somebody behind the curtains that we're not aware of, helping with some of that.
Even if not just like his wife, like helping him survive.
Yeah, exactly. There's the unspoken spouse that provides all the income while these game auteured men do their craft.
Oh, no, the GMTK guy, I think he makes like 70K a month off his YouTube videos.
Yeah. I was speaking broadly.
You're just speaking broadly. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
I am only. That is the thing I am also vaguely aware of. Like, I'm not sure what that. What is Game Maker's Toolkit? Like, what is it?
Game Maker's Toolkit is just, I think, one of the very best game design series on YouTube.
Okay.
And I think it's quickly growing into the largest, because you can usually tell these things when there's a ton of like clones popping up everywhere, and there have been over the years.
Okay.
And of course I want to call them the biggest because I'm like, I got top scores in the biggest game jam in the world,
Right. So they got to be the biggest. Yeah, I've definitely got a lot of like submissions Indie Apocalypse that are also GMTK. I've gotten to recognize them just from the description of the game. Like, oh, this was also submitted to that because it says something about out of control or you lack controls.
Oh yeah.
I was like,
I made a game for the out of control one that was just you scream at a cube to make it move, and the sound wave at the bottom actually has hitboxes on it, and it knocks the cube around.
Okay.
So you just yell at the cube, and you have to collect points on the screen until you win. Pretty much.
It reminds me of there was a game. This game is like 4 or 5 years old, where you clapped at an American flag and it would go up.
Yeah, I did find a lot of games kind of like in that vein of like there was one where you're like in a scary place, like a haunted mansion kind of place, and you can only your camera view is inside of the mouth in the backs, and it only responds to your vocal range
Okay.
to open the mouth. So in order to see, you have to scream.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. So you're like trying to walk around and things are attacking you, and you have to scream when you see something so you can see to get away.
Do you remember what that was called?
No, not at all.
Okay. The game I was talking about, I believe it was called Americlap. It's really straightforward. Says what says what it is on the tin.
Yeah, I want to say the name had tonsils in it, but I could be completely off base, so I'm not gonna just throw out titles.
Now, do you do a lot of game jams?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you
Absolutely. I have kind of a theory that like a lot of creators, they have their minor works and their major works.
Yeah.
And like if you look at like collections of short stories of famous authors, you can find a lot of in their short story collections, you can find a lot of the ideas that were basically became their major work, their big famous work.
Right.
And so I believe in like you're working on your main things, but then you have a ton of small little games you do with different people. You want to get different perspectives, different everything, and it all becomes like this kindling you use to make a bonfire somewhere else.
Yeah, I think all forms do it. Like that's what singles and EPs are.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what or just like general anthology work. So do you have like a major project you're working on?
I have I have a couple. But you know, when I first started all this, I worked for 3 years on a mobile game that it made diddly squat, and I've something always kind of bothered me about having that game out there and then get removed from the store because I needed to update some small minuscule code thing.
Right.
So I'm remastering it right now with using like learning all this new shader and visual programming, and I'm gonna release it on PC. But I wouldn't call that my major work; it's more of a remaster. But
yeah,
my other major work is a game called The Abandoned, which Metaform is kind of one of the kindling for.
Okay.
And it's like a game where you're basically in limbo. You don't know how you got there, and it's got a lot of Disco Elysium influence in it now, where people are projects that you work on. They're not necessarily you go up and fight them, because I'm kind of sick of games just everything was resolved with violence.
Yeah.
And so it's like the people they're essentially like demons, or they're like humans that have like these horrible psychological flaws, and they've basically put themselves in this world by being that way, and nobody really knows why they're there. So it's almost like you're like locked in some prison somewhere.
Right.
And you need to figure out what you want to do to get out of this world, and you have to kind of garner support from the people that you run into. You either need information from them, or you need some power from them, or you need their social support, like, you know, I need you to be on board with this or whatever. So it's kind of creates a combat system that's more about manipulating someone's mind, or having a conversation with them, or trying to befriend them or something. So instead of dice rolls for checks, it's like aim game checks where you have to hit targets and stuff like that.
Yeah, so. I mean, really, when you boil it down, you can use math for everything. You don't need to only use it to make guns and hitboxes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just the abstraction of trying to figure out something that's fun with that has been extremely difficult. So a lot of prototypes are being made, and then like getting the narrative figured out.
Right.
All that.
And like the narrative can change as you prototype something different, and like, oh well, now I have a new gameplay system. How do I but how does that fit the narrative I already have, and that sort of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. So and also like if you're gonna have like this unique conversation system, then how do you make it not just be like, oh, they like that?
Right.
they didn't like that, and
They-
that might be what I have to do just to make the game be able to finish without writing a fractal of a million
Yeah,
words. Of
I was
dialogue.
gonna say also, how do you do that without creating like 50,000 words?
Right. Yeah.
This gargantuan, like, oh, I now have created the longest piece of written fiction because
Right.
I wanted to make sure this was all accounted
It's-
for and there was nuance.
It's been 50 years. I hope my children and grandchildren finish this game.
Oh no, it's no longer compatible in the OSs of the time.
Right. It doesn't
Please.
work on. It doesn't work on the quantum psychological network of
Yeah.
21, 22.
Please, children, launch it in Windows 10 compatibility mode.
Yeah, you know, in Metaform, syncing up all those different word combination possibilities, there
Yeah.
was like 600 possibilities, and like I have all these spreadsheets for every single dialogue of like the grid of like trying to put a word in every single
Right.
possible combination and stuff like that. That was
That's why you have that good old I don't understand fallback.
right. Yeah, I actually changed I changed it to words have so many meanings that nothing makes sense because some of the playtesters kept forgetting that they need to think about words as having different meanings.
Right.
So I made the fall through remind them of that constantly, and that helped a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember way back in the day when I was like, well, the player character has to respond to every single line of dialogue because you're having a conversation. Or they have to respond to, I guess, every single thought
Hmm.
like a person would within a conversation. Like, no.
And and also context in a conversation can change things. It's like you're talking about something we haven't talked about yet, sir, and Mr. Game person, or you keep talking about this like we haven't been discussing it for the last hour. You know, like this,
Yeah.
like dialogue can be very.
Or like I picked up this information later, but I did not think to make it that my character has the context for this information in this scene with this character.
Yeah, and so you have to like use all these little hacks and tricks to make it to where the player doesn't notice or they're not able to get in that situation, rather than make a custom solution for every possible scenario.
Right, because nobody has enough time on it, or I guess enough money to collaborative. That's your collaborative 10,000 person novel, you know.
Yes,
If
yeah,
if
and
you've read there was a very good like blog post that I've mentioned a lot. I think I mentioned a lot of Melisantani's stuff. I did a thing. It was like alive games versus dead games, and the idea of a dead game existing as something that you do not see any individuals in, any humans in.
they're kind of depressing.
Yeah, and how like they actually can be made by individuals as well. I mean, honestly I play a lot of them for Indie Apocalypse. There's like here's a thing where it's like, well, you're just making like a box and you named it Mr. Box, and he's gonna go through an obstacle course, and I guess technically.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean that we ascribe characterization to things that animate
Yeah.
no matter what. Usually,
It's
there's a
weird.
really good series called Characters in Motion. If you've ever heard of that,
It sounds
um,
familiar.
it's essentially just a really good anthology. I don't know if that's the right word. Collection of videos made by motion artists, and where
Okay.
they kind of shows you can turn anything into a character, and
I
you
think
can
I do know
follow
what
it.
you're talking about then. Once you mentioned it is a video series, I'm like, oh yes, I think it has like yes, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of
Um,
like weird. There's a lot of submissions that are like, it's strange because it's like there's a strange thing in games where you can create what is like functionally you playing scales like passably well and like releasing it as a game. If that makes sense, like you're just kind of.
You mean like playing scale and music?
Yeah, like it's like an
da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
exercise in right. And I feel like I've played plenty of what is the video game equivalent of that. Like I guess this like I guess suppose this is technically a platformer, but
Mhm.
there's like it feels like is an exercise in just making a thing.
Technique.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'll notice that a lot, I think, from student work, where they've just learned this principle and now they're
Right.
applying it in a kinesthetic way, I guess you could say. they're gaining experiential knowledge through creating something. I think that's great.
Yes, yeah.
It's great on a learning basis for sure. And if you could take one little element and create something all around it, I think that's fantastic. It's just as you get more experience, you start to see how you can kind of bend it to create something a
Right.
little bit more unique than just showing off the technique.
Or maybe you didn't need to make an itch page for this in a store page. It's
Right.
like,
I mean, again, it's experiential knowledge. Maybe I'm defending myself from releasing games and trying to make money off them, but like it's like you gotta make things and feel it the entire way through,
right,
and
okay.
you kind of know what it's like.
I
And,
gotcha.
you know, but if somebody's doing that just over and over again, they're like, I'm going to use the color blue with squares. Now I'm
Yeah.
going to use the color blue with circles, and I'm going to sell each one of these as a brand new thing.
Yeah,
Then it's getting a little bit like you're not really putting that extra elbow
Right.
grease. Again, I don't want to be accusatory, so I'm kind of regretting already what I've said.
No, it's like it's just the thing I don't see as much in other art forms, where it's like someone's not releasing a book of all the cubes they've drawn in their sketchbook, you know?
Right. Yeah. Which could be cool. It
Yeah,
could be
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, but it's like
If done a certain way.
it's like it's kind of just a weird thing that is present within like game design space, where like
Yes.
I think
It's
people
like I just learned how to use Unity and the character controller and the this and that, and I'm making a game out of it. And here you go. And it's like,
Right.
well, I've played that 1,000 times because everyone else has made one of those.
right. But also, I mean, from the top down, you're encouraged to just keep making what everybody else is making. So it's
True.
like
Yes.
you're doing the right thing there, because you're just, how are you supposed to know any better if
Right.
from
And that's
trip-
where it kind of gets into having like teachers and mentors and inspiration
yeah
that kind of say, okay, you're doing good here, but try this. Here's a challenge for you. You know,
Right.
like find that 5% harder than what you can currently do and strive for that constantly every time. And right quick, I was thinking earlier we were talking about like, you know, you're trying to make something and you don't know how long it's going to take and you don't know
Yeah.
if you're going to make it and all that. I've been, you know, looking at like the indie boom, the early indie boom, and all the like the first famous indie developers and
Right.
such.
who had
found it
themselves been around for a while.
Yeah, they had their minor works and their major works and their small teams and everything like that. They've made a lot of stuff, but the game that made them, they always were in debt when they got it out.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
thing, people underestimate the power of, say, for instance, Microsoft making your game one of the most 4 important games of the summer.
Are you talking about Super Meat Boy?
Yeah, and like Braid and whatever those other games that were in the summer of arcade.
Yeah, but they were all in debt when
Yeah,
they
yeah.
released. Like, you know, Jonathan Blow was $200,000 in debt. I think Edmund McMillan was $40,000 in debt.
Right.
It's like, how many people went $100,000 in debt? Like, how many hundreds of people went $100,000 in debt and didn't see a single dime?
Exactly. How many people are like in the life situations where they can accrue $200,000 of debt?
Yes, that too.
Like, how would I even go about attaining so much debt?
Right. Yeah, it's
Like, you have to have
Expensive
the credit line for that.
right. Yeah. So it's all a process. I
Yeah.
I guess we're at the end of the 30 minutes. I didn't want to end on something so negative, but I will say it's worth trying.
Yes. No, everything, like, the underlying ethos of Indiepocalypse is, like, when I talk about these, like, scales cube games or whatever, what I'm saying is, to these students, just fucking swing hard. Like,
Hmm.
like, you know, when I say nobody cares about like your cube boys adventure in Triangle World, what I mean is you probably have ideas in there that are like fascinating.
Right.
That-
Yeah, there could be a really good narrative, or there could be a unique way of doing that, like that no one else has ever thought of.
Right.
And maybe you didn't even realize it. You know, sometimes, you know, I'll see people make a game and they'll tell me about it and they'll be all really excited about something that I've seen 1,000 times, but then they'll mention some little thing like you know, they're like with a wave of the hand, like, oh, I don't really care about this, but this is
Yeah.
in there. I'm like, make that your game. That right there, I've never heard of that before, and that sounds amazing. I want to see
Yeah.
a prototype, please.
Right. Just like, I want to be nothing else if not like encouraging you just to do whatever you want to do. Like try everything you want to try, and just like because
don't feel like you have to do what everyone else is doing. And I know that's been kind of a theme of everyone talking today.
right. Well, I guess that's like it's the nature of the kind of people that are attracted to the project, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that sometimes listen, I realize that I will increasingly occasionally come off as like the indie games curmudgeon, you know, but it's because I care and I want people to make better stuff or believe that they can just like make whatever they want and they don't have to like make something that's like ready for an app store or something.
Right. And you know the curmudgeon thing, like I've tried so hard to avoid that. Just like, yeah, maybe that annoys me like deep down inside in some way, but I don't want that to come off as like stop doing things or you're bad.
Right.
Or, like,
no, it's actually
like yeah, you're doing something. That in itself is amazing and inspiring. You're inspiring all of us by even having the excitement to created this. Now,
right.
Have you thought about doing this?
Yeah, you made your scales. Now don't release you playing scales on Bandcamp. Instead, just make a song with that knowledge.
Right. Yeah. Make a project that requires that scale and some more scales that you haven't learned yet, and then you got to learn them.
Or that you haven't learned. You just fucking jam on something and figure something out. I am infinitely more fascinated by like amateur works that are like trying something interesting. I think like a student trying something interesting can always make something that has like more longevity and more interest than a 200-person studio. Like scale and scope and budget have nothing to do with whether art good, to put it simply.
Well, I will say that everyone has different roles. Like the AAA studios, their role is to push it forward on that. We've got the most money. We're gonna brute force this. We're gonna keep.
Somebody has to make hot dogs or whatever.
What?
You know, easy.
Oh, everyone has a role. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't even making a joke like that. I was more like someone has to make easily digestible mass market stuff.
Oh, yeah. But no, I mean, I see amazing things in everything. So like, I'll play like Cyberpunk, and I'll be like, oh, that's really cool. I could never do that in my indie stuff, and I'm gonna work my way around doing stuff like that. But there's something there. There's something that kind of sunk down into my gut, and maybe it'll pop out in its own form for me.
There's some things you can only do with hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. Yeah.
And with that said, Casey, I gotta know something out there. No games allowed. What would you recommend?
I've been thinking about this since I heard you asking others, and I'm gonna go ahead and just say Kurt Vonnegut right now. Anything by Kurt Vonnegut.
I am like 3/4 of the way through On the Road, the original scroll, as it were.
I haven't read that one, but I will.
There is a picture of it on him in the back on a typewriter, and I find it very funny for some reason.
He inspires that kind of feeling just by looking at him. It's funny.
He's very serious looking, and like he looks like a tough guy in plaid, but he looks like he's almost pecking on a typewriter.
Like he's the bird.
I'm like a big image of like him hunched over a little typewriter, and it's very funny to me. But anyway, yeah. I'm going to go to break now. Thank you. We'll all be back after this video that I'm going to play because I wanted to play this video because I like this song and this song has a video associated with it. Goodbye.
Awesome. Cheers.
Speaking of going ahead,
no.
welcome back to Indie Apocalypse Radio. You're saying something about film school, I believe, as we're talking about this thing.
Yeah, so